recently there was a whole thing I saw about pretty privilege and how, you know, if you're pretty, the world is easier for you and people just pay more attention to you. While that is true, as a parent, I think of, yeah, but she also has to deal with all of the unwanted attention. If you're a pretty girl and you're growing up, then once puberty hits, there's always going to be somebody trying to get in your pants. And creepily, it might be happening even before you hit puberty. I mean, let's face it, there's enough creep in the world for that to be happening. So what do? Well, one of the things is you try not to be overtly cruel to people. And that's wherever you are. And if you're not one of the pretty people, don't automatically assume they have it easy. Because a pretty person attracts all the attention. All the good attention and all the bad attention. Because there are predators everywhere in this world. And the pretty people, especially while they're children and they're in a state of not having agency and they don't really have the ability to make good decisions or protect themselves, they are the victims. They are the first victims of the predators. And it happens for most of their life. So imagine the life of a pretty person. Specifically, let's go with a pretty female, because they have a very specific path. So when they're not even really old enough to understand, there are predators who are trying to take advantage of them, to be around them, to rub up against them, because this is a physical body thing. Maybe there's a type of radiance that they develop as well, because they're just beautiful. And as a result of that, you start with pedophiles, and then you get the ephebophiles, which are the ones that go after teenagers. And then while they are going through puberty and their hormones are exploding and they're starting to get funny feelings, any person that they look at and go, I fancy you, is just going to fall into their lap. All they have to do is ask. Hell, they probably don't even have to ask. They just make prolonged eye contact with somebody, and the next thing they know, they're like, oh, hi, do you want to play footsie? You know? And it's a superpower. And so what happens when people get power? Well, they tend to go a little nuts with it. And so a youthful mind that doesn't really understand how the world works yet discovers they have this superpower where all they have to do is give a little come hither to somebody, and they come the F hither. It takes a little longer to develop the go yond. So, with that going on, power corrupts, and for a child that doesn't really have their self figured out yet, power corrupts. And so a lot of the pretty teenage girls are the mean girls, the waspish girls, the ones who are just... They're drunk on their own power, their head is up in the air, and they look down upon the mere mortals with contempt. And, you know, most of us has a couple of them in our head right now, as we're like, oh yeah, that girl. When I was in junior high, that girl. When I was in high school, those girls. When I got to college, oh yeah, there was a group of them. But there's also the pretty person who does not submit to that and is just delighted to be here. Maybe it's because they don't believe that they're pretty. Maybe they've had somebody that shut them down and told them they weren't. Maybe it's because they just have confidence problems. Maybe it's because they had a hard time keeping friends, because the nice people looked at her and went, oh, she's out of my league. This is why a lot of really beautiful women think that men are scum. Because the nice guys looked at her and was like, oh man, I would just be bothering her if I talked to her. I'm just not going to bother. I'm going to leave her alone. It's the good thing to do. But the predators don't care. The sociopaths, the psychopaths, oh yeah, they're all about that. They're like, well, you don't know until you ask, and so off they go with infinite confidence. And let's face it, psychopaths are pretty good at sliming their way in because they're very charming. Because they're predators. They're the ultimate predators as far as humanity goes. And they slime their way in, and they make you feel like a princess, and they make you feel like you're on top of the world as they take control of your life and separate you from your friends and make sure that you don't like your family anymore, strip away your entire social network and dominate and control you so that they can just destroy your life for the chuckles. I'm actually watching two people go through this right now. And one of them is at the end of one of these relationships, and one of them is, she's setting up some danger signs. I listened to her talk about her relationship, and I'm like, do you really want to marry this guy? But it's not my place. I can't do anything. I can't say anything because nobody's going to listen to that. It happens. Not just to the pretty people, it happens to a lot of people. So, there's a lot of contempt in the world right now for anybody with a privilege or an advantage. And there is a condescension towards people who try. There's a condescension towards people who genuinely care. It's like when somebody goes, oh, well, they have a hero complex. Well, that's a person that genuinely wants to make the world a better place, and they feel it's their responsibility to do so. And while it may be annoying sometimes when, Mr. Heroic comes bashing in through the door and goes, ho ho, I'm here to save you, and you're like, we really didn't want you here. Or the busybody, motherly archetype who really, really cares, and that's why she's so aggravating, because she really, really cares. And you're like, oh, they have a hero complex, as you try to dismiss what they're doing. Because maybe you're doing something stupid, and you don't really want to admit it. So, there may be a bit of personal baggage in that statement for me. But yeah. Try not to judge the pretty people too much. And also, don't assume that just because they're pretty, they hit the lottery and they have, they've gotten, they will have it easier than me. Maybe. Maybe not. You won't know until you learn that person's story.